He said it loud enough for the court reporter to hear it. Rhys Kendall leaned back in his chair at the defense table, arms folded across a suit that cost more than most Calgary families spent on groceries in a month, and he watched his wife walk through the courtroom doors alone. No legal team, no file boxes, just a woman in a plain gray blazer carrying a worn leather folio, and he laughed. Not under his breath, not a murmur he later claimed was a cough, a genuine full-throated sound of amusement that made the observers in the gallery shift uncomfortably in their seats. "She came by herself," he murmured to his lawyer, Broderick Oates, who did not smile back. Broderick had been practicing family law in Alberta for 26 years, and something about the woman crossing the courtroom floor made the back of his neck go cold. He couldn't have said why. She wasn't dressed to impress anyone. She moved without hurry. She set her folio on the plaintiff's table, squared it neatly with the edge, folded her hands on top of it, and looked at the empty judge's bench with the patience of someone who had been waiting a very long time for this particular moment. "Before we get into what happened next, and I promise you, you will not see any of it coming, do me a favor. If you're watching this for the first time, subscribe to Ivory Secrets and drop a comment below telling me what city you're tuning in from right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning, because what happened in that Calgary courtroom on a Wednesday morning in November didn't start in a courtroom at all. It started 11 years earlier in a rented office above a print shop on 17th Avenue with a woman who believed in a man nobody else was willing to bet on. Her name was Cora Lindqvist. She had grown up in Lethbridge, the daughter of a high school science teacher and a woman who ran the town's only independent bookstore. Neither of them had money to spare, but they had something that turned out to be worth more in the long run. They never once told Cora that her ambitions were too large for her life. She studied engineering at the University of Calgary on a scholarship she'd applied for 14 times before it came through. Graduated near the top of her class and spent 4 years working on structural assessments for mid-rise buildings in the downtown core. Every person she worked with said the same thing about her, that she understood not just how things were built, but why they might fail. Then she met Rhys. He was 32, charming in the way certain men are charming before the world gives them too much, genuinely, hungrily, with the quality of a man who still believed he had to earn the room rather than simply occupy it. He was running a small energy consulting firm out of a space barely large enough to hold a desk and a whiteboard covered in handwriting that never quite became a business plan. His client said no more often than yes, but Rhys had a talent for making the word eventually sound like a certainty. And Cora, who had spent her whole life being precise and methodical, found herself drawn to someone who seemed to operate entirely on conviction. "You're the first person who's actually read the whole proposal," he told her. The night, he spread 30 pages of projections across a restaurant table and watched her go through them with a red pen. "Everyone else just skips to the numbers. The numbers only make sense if the assumptions behind them do," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, then, "I think you just saved this company." She had, as it turned out. The flaw she found in his liability projections would have ended the deal before it started. She flagged it, helped him rewrite the section, and 3 weeks later he signed his first significant contract. He held her face in both hands the night the ink dried and told her that everything from here on out belonged to both of them, that she was the reason any of it was possible. Cora believed him. She believed him the way you believe something that is true, at the time, it said, without understanding how much a person can mean something fully and still, eventually, let it go. She put her own work on hold when his started to grow. Not all at once. It never happens all at once. First it was evenings reviewing his contracts, then weekends. Then a secondment to his office when a major project, someone who understood load calculations and structural integrity at a level his team didn't. The year his firm landed its first government infrastructure contract, Cora did not take a single project of her own. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself there would be time. The towers Rhys's firm helped design started going up along the Bow River. His name appeared in the business section of the Herald, at galas in the Telus Convention Center, in box seats, at stampeders, games, at charity dinners where the entrees arrived under silver domes. She was introduced the same way in the same tone sep, with the same warmth that people reserve for things they find pleasant but not particularly interesting. This is Cora, my wife. She keeps everything running at home. Sometimes, if the crowd was the right kind, Rhys would add something more, with a laugh that invited everyone to laugh with him. Honestly, she keeps me running. I'd be lost without her. Though what would you even do without all this, Cora? You'd go absolutely mad in a week. And Cora would smile and accept whatever she'd been handed, and say something gracious, and spend the drive home pressing her thumbnail into her palm so hard it left a mark. Because the worst part wasn't the comment. The worst part was that some small, exhausted corner of her had started to wonder if he was right. She is the kind of person everyone decides is finished before she has had a chance to decide anything for herself. And here is what people do not understand about that kind of person. Once everyone stops watching, she can do almost anything at all. It started with a numbered company. Cora had a system for the household files, insurance, property taxes, investment statements, that Rhys had long since stopped paying attention to, because Cora had long since stopped needing him to. One evening in February, sorting through a folder she kept for his business correspondence, she found a statement she didn't recognize. A quarterly summary from a numbered corporation, 187392 Alberta Limited, showing a balance transfer that didn't match anything in their shared accounts. She copied the page. She put the original back. She said nothing. She started looking. And once she started looking, she could not stop, because the thing about a man who has been careful for a long time is that the volume of what he requires its own infrastructure. And that infrastructure has edges. And the edges, if you know how to read them, tell you everything. Numbered companies in Alberta don't list their directors publicly, but they have registration documents filed with Alberta Corporate Registry, and Corporate Registry is open to the public. Cora had spent 15 years understanding how structures work, how buildings stand and how they fall. She applied the same logic to what she was finding, and what she found was that Rhys had been quietly, methodically moving value out of their marriage into a collection of numbered corporations that appeared on no family disclosure she had ever seen. The transfers had begun, she eventually calculated, approximately 19 months before he sat her down at the kitchen table peel and told her, in the careful voice of a man who had rehearsed this, that he thought they had grown apart. He had been planning to leave her, and leave her with nothing, for almost 2 years before she knew anything was wrong. She sat with that knowledge for a long time. It did not break her. Something shifted underneath it, but the thing that shifted was not her courage. It was a kind of softness she'd been carrying without knowing it, the last small hope that she had misread him. Once that was gone, something colder and more useful moved into its place. She had also in those same years been doing something else that no one knew about. 11 years earlier, before Rhys, she had completed 2 years of a law degree at the University of Calgary before transferring into engineering. She had always told herself she'd go back. She hadn't, but 5 years ago, quietly, online at first, then in person on Thursday evenings when Rhys believed she was at planning committee meetings for a downtown revitalization project. She had re-enrolled. She finished the coursework. She sat the Law Society of Alberta Bar admissions exam on a Tuesday morning in March at a testing center in Red Deer where no one knew her face. She passed. The letter came to a private mailbox she rented 3 blocks from a Safeway on Macleod Trail. She stood in the parking lot and read it twice. She had expected to feel triumphant. Instead, she felt something quieter and far more durable. She felt ready. The courtroom in the Calgary Court Center was the kind of room that reminds you the law considers itself permanent. Wood paneling, the provincial crest on the wall, overhead lighting that flattened everything into equal clarity. Rhys had brought 3 lawyers. They arranged themselves along the defense table with the unhurried competence of people who expected to be done by lunch. Across the room, Cora set down a single leather folio and waited. When Justice Ramona Fleury entered, the room rose and resettled. She had been on the bench for 17 years and had the quality of a person who had stopped being surprised by men a long time ago. She reviewed the seating arrangement over the top of her glasses. "Miss Lindqvist," she said, "I see you've dismissed your counsel of record. You intend to represent yourself today?" "Yes, Your Honor." A pause. "You understand the complexity of what's before us? Mr. Oates has significant experience in matrimonial property matters." "I understand, Your Honor." From the defense table, the sound that came from Rhys was small and quickly swallowed. But everyone in the front rows heard it. Justice Fleury's gaze moved to him with the precision of a scalpel. "Is something funny, Mr. Kendall?" "No, Your Honor, he arranged his face into something appropriate. I'm sorry, I only worry about my wife. This process it's a great deal for anyone." "How considerate," Justice Fleury said, in a voice flat enough to walk across. "Let's proceed." Broderick Oates gave his opening statement with the polished inevitability of a man who had delivered versions of this speech many times before. He spoke of a business empire battered by commodity price cycles, of debt restructured and restructured again, of a man far less wealthy than his public profile suggested. He spoke of a prenuptial agreement signed freely by both parties at the outset of their marriage. He used the word transparency. 4 times he sat down. Then Justice Fleury looked at the plaintiff's table. Cora rose slowly. She smoothed the front of her blazer. She stood for a moment without speaking, and the gallery, which had come expecting to watch something go badly wrong, leaned forward slightly without meaning to. "Thank you, Your Honor." Her voice was quiet, unhurried. "I only want to put the truth on the table. Whatever it looks like when it's all in front of us, I want us to look at what's actually there." She sat down. That was the whole opening. Rhys turned to Broderick and whispered something. Broderick did not respond. He was watching Cora's hands, which were perfectly, unnervingly still. The morning belonged, on the surface, to Rhys. Broderick called an accountant named Desmond Park, who walked the court through a picture of financial modesty, assets eroded by market exposure, net worth a fraction of what the headlines had once suggested. Cora cross-examined him in under 2 minutes. "You've managed Mr. Kendall's accounts for how long?" 4 years. "All of his accounts?" "All the accounts I was retained to manage." He said it smoothly, professionally. Cora looked at him for just a moment. Then, "That's an interesting distinction. Thank you, Mr. Park. Nothing further." She sat down. During the noon recess, Rhys stood in the corridor and performed the role he had always performed best in difficult rooms. The confident man, untroubled, generous enough to be amused by circumstances. His friends from the industry had come, men in expensive casual wear, who had blocked off the morning to watch this. "You see that?" Rhys was saying. "That was her opening. The whole thing. I want the truth on the table." He spread his hands. "I lived with this woman for 11 years. I know exactly how this goes." Down the hall, out of his sight, Cora stood alone by a window with a paper cup of water. A young, articling student named Paloma, assigned to observe proceedings, approached carefully. "Miss Lindqvist, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why didn't you push harder on the accountant? You had him there." Cora took a sip of water. "A witness will protect the thing he's afraid of," she said. "He builds a wall around it, and the wall tells you exactly where the thing is buried." She looked at the park, said, "All the accounts I was retained to manage." He was very careful about that word, retained. A man with nothing to hide doesn't guard a word like that. He just answers the question. Paloma stared at her. "You knew he'd say it." "I knew he'd say something like it. There's always something like it." Cora dropped the cup into a bin. "I've had a long time to prepare. Longer than anyone in that room knows." In the afternoon, Rhys took the stand. It was a calculated move. Let the judge see a reasonable man. Let him deny under oath the things the other side would spend the afternoon failing to prove. Do you have any undisclosed assets in this matter? Broderick asked. None, Rhys said clearly, looking at the judge. I've been entirely open. I have nothing to hide. Any accounts, investments, or property not declared in these proceedings? Nothing. Everything is on the table. Cora rose for cross-examination. Rhys watched her approach with her worn leather folio and felt, for the first time all day, something close to relaxed. He knew this woman. He had been married to this woman. He understood the shape of how she moved through a room. Hello, Rhys, she said. Cora. He offered the gallery a small patient look. You said you have no undisclosed accounts. Nothing hidden. That's right. No investments or holdings that haven't been declared to this court? None. You're certain? You're under oath? Completely certain. She nodded and made a small mark on a page. For a moment she looked like a woman who had reached the end of what she'd planned to say. Then she closed the leather folio. She set her pen down beside it. When she looked up again, the face Rhys saw was not the face he had walked in expecting. The careful patience was gone. What was underneath it was something else entirely, clear and level and absolutely without apology. Your Honor, she said, I'd like to introduce Exhibit A. Broderick was on his feet before she finished. Objection. We've received no prior notice of. You received full notice, Mr. Oates. Cora did not turn to look at him. In the supplemental disclosure, filed with the clerk's office at 8:52 this morning. It's time-stamped. I'm happy to wait while your team confirms. 3 seconds of silence. Then, one of the lawyers at the defense table began scrolling rapidly through a tablet. The look on his face told Broderick everything. He sat down. Objection overruled, Justice Fleury said. Proceed, Ms. Lindqvist. Cora walked to her table and lifted a folder. She held it for a moment. Then she looked at Rhys, still in the witness box, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Rise, she said. I'm going to ask you one more time. You are under oath, and I already know the answer. Do you have any undisclosed accounts? No, it came out half a second too slow. Are you familiar with a numbered corporation, registered in Alberta, 1847392 Alberta Limited? Rhys's face did not move. That was the tell. A man hearing an unfamiliar name reacts. A man hearing a name he has spent years burying goes carefully, precisely blank. I'd have to check. I have many business relationships. Let me help you check. Cora opened the folder. Exhibit A is a certified set of corporate registry documents and financial records obtained through lawful disclosure, verified by the issuing institution. They show a private investment account controlled solely and directly by the witness. Its current balance is $28,400,000. The courtroom did not gasp so much as contract. A single sharp collective inhale, the sound of a room understanding something all at once. Rhys's face cracked. That's not. Where did you? That account, Cora continued, was opened 22 months ago. The corporation's sole registered director, according to the certified articles of incorporation forming the second half of Exhibit A, is you. Your signature appears on the account application. Your signature appears on 9 separate transfer authorizations. She paused. Would you like me to read the dates on those transfers? Because I find the dates very instructive. Objection, Broderick said, but there was nothing behind it. On what grounds, Mr. Oates? Justice Fleury asked. He sat back down without answering. The transfers begin, Cora said. 19 months before you filed for divorce. 19 months of moving money from jointly held accounts into an account you believed I would never find. She turned to face Rhys directly. You told this court, under oath, less than 20 minutes ago, that you had nothing to hide. Would you like to revise that testimony? There may have been. The numbered company is a passive structure. It's a standard mechanism in this province. You can't simply. You forgot $28 million, Cora said. Not a question, not cruel. Just a fact stated the way you state a fact that has been waiting a long time to be stated. In the third row, the woman who had been checking her phone since 9 o'clock put it face down on her knee. But Cora was not finished. She had known from the very beginning of her preparation that numbers alone would not be enough. Numbers could be explained. Passive vehicles. Market timing. Restructuring. Rhys was a man who had spent his career turning complexity into a wall that people didn't know how to climb, so she had saved the second thing. "Your Honor," she said, "I'd like to introduce Exhibit B." Broderick didn't even rise. Exhibit B is an audio recording. Its provenance is documented in the accompanying affidavit, and its authenticity has been independently verified. It is a recording of the witness in his own words, discussing a plan to move marital assets heads through a series of numbered corporations prior to finalizing this divorce. She paused, just slightly. It was made at a dinner, in our home, at a table where he had no reason to imagine that anyone was paying close attention. Rhys's color drained. "You, in our house." "Alberta is a one-party consent province," Cora said, not looking at him. "I was a party to the conversation." "Correct," Justice Fleury said. "I'll allow it." A sound moved through the gallery. Not laughter, not simple shock, something lower and more sustained. The sound of people quietly revising what they thought they understood about the woman at the plaintiff's table. Cora set a small silver recording device on the table and did not play it. She let it sit there, small, more dangerous than everything on the defense table combined. And then she did the last thing, the one that finished it. She reached into the leather folio and took out a single laminated card. She walked to the witness box and placed it flat on the rail, directly in front of Rhys, so he had no choice but to look down. He looked, and his face went slack in a way she had never seen it go before, in 11 years of watching his face. "Do you know what that is?" she asked. He did not answer. "That is my membership card from the Law Society of Alberta," Cora said. "It has been active for 4 years. Justice Fleury leaned forward. "Miss Lindqvist, you are a licensed lawyer?" "I am, Your Honor. I have been for 4 years. I chose to represent myself today because no one alive understood this case better than I did." She held Rhys's gaze, "and because I wanted him to hear it from me." Rhys stared at the card. He stared at it for a long time. "You hid this from me," he finally said, and his voice had gone somewhere small and strange. "All these years, you just sat there while I—" He couldn't finish it. "I didn't lie to you, Rhys," Cora said quietly. "I never once told you I couldn't do this. You decided that on your own. You decided it because it was convenient. Because it made everything simpler if I stayed small." She picked up the folio. "I let you believe what you'd already chosen to believe. That was always your weakness. You only ever saw what made you comfortable." She turned toward her table, and then, as if it were an afterthought, she stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "You told me for 11 years that I'd be lost without you." She let it settle. "You never thought to ask what happens when it's the other way around." Rhys opened his mouth and found it empty. He looked at the gallery, at his friends in their expensive casual wear, and he watched them, one by one, stop looking back. He looked at Broderick Oates, and Broderick was studying the table in front of him with the careful attention of a man who had already begun calculating what the next week would require of his professional reputation. "Your Honor," Broderick said quietly, rising, "may we have a brief recess?" "You may," Justice Fleury said. "Take what you need, Mr. Oates." She glanced at Rhys, still motionless in the witness box. "Your client will need it." The recess lasted 9 minutes before Broderick walked back into the courtroom and informed Justice Fleury, with the controlled calm of a man setting down a very heavy thing, that he was requesting to withdraw as counsel of record. Rhys, against Broderick's explicit advice, chose to continue unrepresented. "She did it alone," he said. "If she can do it, so can I." Broderick collected his documents without looking at his client again. What followed was the spectacle of a man who had built an empire on the certainty that he was the most capable person in any room discovering, in real time, in front of a judge and a gallery and a court reporter, what it felt like to be completely wrong about that. He tried to suggest Cora had been involved in structuring the numbered companies. She noted, calmly, that the first transfer occurred 11 years into their marriage, well after she had withdrawn from his business affairs. She cited the date. She cited the dollar amount. She did not look at her notes. He tried to invoke the prenuptial agreement. "By all means," she said, "let's talk about it." She opened a section of the folio she had not touched all day, and she read, from memory, the document. Before her serving only as reference, Section 11, subsection B of the agreement Rhys's own lawyers had drafted 11 years earlier. In the event that either party is found to have knowingly concealed or misrepresented matrimonial property with the intent to defraud the other party during dissolution of the marriage, the limitation set forth in this agreement shall be rendered null and void as to the offending party, and the distribution of assets shall proceed under the Matrimonial Property Act of Alberta without reference to the terms herein. The silence that followed was different from all the silences before it. Earlier silences had been shock. This one was comprehension, the whole room understanding, all at once, what had just happened. "The agreement you built to protect yourself," Cora said, "only holds if you played by the rules you agreed to. You didn't. And by hiding $28 million, you personally destroyed the only legal instrument standing between you and an equal division of everything we built together." She set the page down. "Your own lawyers wrote that clause, Rhys, 11 years ago, to protect you from a dishonest spouse." A pause. "They simply never imagined the dishonest spouse would be you." Rhys stared at his wife. He stared at her the way a man stares at the ground after it has already moved. Desmond Park, recalled to the stand, confirmed under questioning that Rhys had directed him to prepare disclosure documents, based on a specific list of accounts. A list Rhys had personally assured him was complete. He said he would not have signed the disclosure had he known about the numbered corporation. He said he wanted that on the record. He did not look at Rhys once. The ruling came at 4:47 in the afternoon. Justice Ramona Fleury did not rush it. "In 17 years on the bench," she said, "I have rarely seen a matter resolve itself with this degree of clarity. The concealment is documented. The fraud on this court is documented. The prenuptial agreement's own terms are unambiguous on the consequence." She found that the numbered corporation constituted hidden matrimonial property. She voided the prenuptial agreement as to Rhys. She ordered a full forensic accounting of all his corporate interests at his expense. She froze his declared accounts pending completion of that accounting. She granted immediate interim maintenance. And then she said the sentence that turned what had been a civil proceeding into something with considerably longer consequences. She was referring the findings to the Alberta Crown for review of potential fraud charges. Rhys said, "This is a divorce." Justice Fleury said, "It was," and brought the gavel down. Afterward, in the corridor, Paloma found Cora standing by the same window as the noon recess. The winter light was settling over the city in long, pale bars. "You won," Paloma said. "The truth won," Cora said. "I just made sure it had somewhere to stand." "What happens now?" Cora looked out at Calgary, at the cranes on the skyline, some of them on projects whose structural plans she had once reviewed at 2 in the morning so Rhys could sign them by 9. "Something I should have been doing a long time ago," she said. The forensic accounting took 4 months. It found not one numbered corporation, but 3. The total value of hidden matrimonial assets came to $41,200,000. Under the Matrimonial Property Act of Alberta, every dollar was subject to equal division. Cora was awarded half. The criminal review resulted in charges that Rhys spent the better part of 2 years attempting to negotiate. He no longer appeared in the business section of the Herald, except in contexts he would not have chosen. 13 months after that Wednesday in November, Cora opened a small family law practice on the ground floor of a building in Inglewood with good light and reasonable rent, and a front door that was easy for anyone to push open. She called it Lindqvist Legal Advocacy. The words painted on the window, in letters she had chosen after a long time of trying other combinations and discarding them all, read, "For the Overlooked." Paloma came to work for her the week the practice opened. She was the first staff member. For several months, she was the only one. The first client came on a Monday. Her name was Bess, and she was 53 years old, and she sat across from Hadis with her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone pale. She had been married for 28 years to a man who managed every financial account they had ever held jointly, and had recently told her, with great patience and a particular kind of gentleness that Cora recognized immediately, that if she left, she would get nothing, because nothing was in her name. "I don't even know what we have," Bess said finally, still not quite able to look up. "He handles everything. He always says I wouldn't cope." Cora listened to all of it without interrupting. She had learned, in 11 years of being the person in the room that no one listened to, exactly how to listen. When Bess finished, Cora reached into her drawer and took out the worn leather folio, the same one she had carried into that courtroom, and set it on the desk between them. "I walked into court with this," she said, "against 3 lawyers and a man who had spent 11 years being entirely certain I wasn't capable of it." She slid the folio across the desk. "He was wrong. And your husband is wrong, too." Bess looked at the folio. She did not touch it, but something shifted in her face, some small, stubborn light coming on in a window that had been dark for a very long time. "You think there's something to find?" she whispered. Cora looked at this woman and saw herself, the self she had been before. She stopped letting anyone else decide the size of her life. "There's always a thread," she said, "somewhere, in everything you've noticed and told yourself not to notice. There is a thread. And once we find it, we pull." She opened the folio and set a blank page on the desk. "Start at the beginning. Tell me everything." The word spread the way it always spreads among people who have been carrying a weight alone and suddenly hear that someone else knows how to carry it. Bess told her sister. Her sister told a friend. The friend had been sitting across dinner tables for years from a man who moved money the way some people move furniture, quietly, when no one was looking, and always toward himself. Within 18 months, the practice had 3 lawyers, a paralegal, and a waiting list. Cora refused, absolutely refused, to move the office somewhere that would feel imposing to ones who needed it. She wanted them to walk in and feel like they belonged. She wanted them to feel, from the moment they pushed open that ground floor door, that they had found someone who already believed them. Some of them were now lawyers themselves. One of them had opened her own practice in Edmonton. And Cora, sitting at her desk one evening, in the blue winter hour when Calgary's sky goes the color of something that has finally been set down after a long time of being carried, thought about the woman she had been before all of this. The engineer who understood how structures failed. The woman at dinner parties who smiled and said nothing, and went home, and pressed her thumbnail into her palm. The woman who had spent 11 years being told, in the gentle, persistent language of 1,000 small moments, that she was lucky to be included in someone else's story. That woman had not been erased. She had been waiting, underneath all the silence, underneath all the dinners and galas, and introductions that named her only as someone's wife, taking notes, keeping track, getting ready. The only thing Rhys had ever truly stolen was time. And even that, Cora had learned, you could reclaim, not by recovering the years. You never recover the years. You reclaim stolen time by refusing to waste a single minute of what remains. Late one afternoon, near closing, a young woman appeared in the doorway. She was perhaps 28, in a coat too thin for November, and she had the stillness of someone who has been rehearsing what to say. For so long she no longer trusts herself to say it. "I know it's late," she said. "I've been standing outside for a while. I wasn't sure if I should come in." "Come in," Cora said. The woman sat. She wrapped her hands around the strap of her bag. "My husband controls everything, every account, every investment. He says if I ever leave, he'll make sure I get nothing. He says I don't understand how any of it works." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "And I used to believe him." Cora looked at her and recognized everything in her face, the specific exhaustion of a person who has been told, too many times in too many quiet ways, that she is smaller than she is. "Used to?" Cora said. The woman lifted her chin very slightly. I found something last month. Documents he didn't know I'd seen. And you looked at them, Cora said. I looked. Cora reached into her desk and set the worn leather folio on the table between them. The moment you decided to look, she said, you had already started. Everything from here is just the work. She opened the folio and set a blank page down, and the work is what I do. The woman leaned forward. She began to talk, and Cora Lindqvist picked up her pen and got to work, because this was who she had always been, underneath all those years of being someone's footnote, the woman who read the whole document, who found the flaw in the assumptions, who understood, with a particular precision of someone trained to see how structures fail and how to make sure the right ones hold, that the most dangerous person in any room has never been the loudest one. It is always the one who stopped needing to be loud a long time ago and has been paying attention ever since.